What group is Christianity closely similar to? The Dead Sea Scrolls were found in caves in the 1950s and connected with the Essenes and Qumran. The Essene Heritage by Martin A. Larson, published in 1967, raised the possibility of a cover-up. There were discrepancies between the much older versions, such as the Dead Sea Scrolls and our modern Bible today. There were also indications that Christianity had not fully begun with Jesus, but had its beginning in the customs and beliefs of the Essenes. Larson suggested this would not be tolerated by the church because it would be too much for people to accept that there was Christianity before Christ. John Marco Allegro also has his beliefs about this topic. He was originally a member of the international team of 8 scholars who began the editing of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Of these men, 4 were Roman Catholics, and he was the only member with no religious commitment. Ironically, Professor Allegro is now not even permitted to see the scrolls. At least 400 documents had been pieced together and prepared for publication by the end of the 1960s, but only 4 or 5 have been released to the public. He also asked searching questions as to why this information has been withheld. It's clear to me that the Church wants to hide any information that can discredit the Church or the Bible. They also seem to kick out scholars who find discrepancies within the Bible that would prove the Bible isn't inerrant. Inerrant is the belief that many Christians have that the Bible is without error. So to push this belief system onto the people, they would have to kick out scholars who find discrepancies within their Bible. Therefore, they do not allow anyone to disagree with them. Forcing beliefs onto people is negatively oriented as it infringes on people's free will, which is something not from God. Respecting free will is what helps people evolve faster and more efficiently. It was inferred that the Church has deliberately deleted references to the Essenes in the Bible because of the similar doctrines between Christianity and the Essenes. Philo, a Jewish Alexandrian philosopher, Pliny, a Roman writer, and Josephus, a Jewish warrior and historian, all wrote and lived at the beginning of the Christian era. Philo is said to have lived between 20 BC and 60 AD, but was not personally associated with the Essenes or their community. Jesus' father, Joseph, passed away around 20 AD, and Jesus passed away around 33 AD, to give you an idea that these men were around during the time of Jesus. Pliny lived from about 23 to 79 AD and wrote a small amount concerning the Essenes. Josephus was born in Jerusalem in about 37 AD, lived within the community, and had first-hand knowledge of them during their latter days. Josephus is considered to be the most reliable source, even more than the New Testament. So these writers were before the New Testament of the Bible was written, which is the basis of Christianity today. These authors only mentioned that Qumran was located in the Dead Sea area. The Roman armies destroyed Qumran in 68 AD, and the ruins sat on top of the salt cliffs by the Dead Sea for almost 2,000 years. The ruins were ignored completely until the discovery of the first Dead Sea Scrolls in 1947. A Bedouin shepherd boy searching for his lost goat found the hidden scrolls in jars in a cave. Most Bedouins are animal herders who migrate into the desert during the rainy winter season and move back toward the cultivated land in the dry summer months. They are an indigenous people of the desert in southern Israel, known as Arabs and desert nomads who speak Arabic. These Roman armies that destroyed Qumran, the community Jesus was a part of and learned from, then were later known to have changed the Bible by revising, rewriting, adding to, and subtracting from during the extensive Council of Nicea biblical edits in the 4th century AD, conducted by the Romans under Emperor Constantine. Books such as the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, talking about the equality of women to men and Mary being a disciple, and the Gospel of Thomas, which spoke about oneness, were taken out. These books are found in the Nag Hammadi scriptures. The Nag Hammadi Library was discovered in 1945 and buried in a large stone jar in the desert outside the modern Egyptian city of Nag Hammadi. It is a collection of religious and philosophic texts gathered and translated into Coptic by 4th century Gnostic Christians and translated into English by dozens of highly reputable experts. First published in 1978 with 45 separate books taken out. It's interesting to note that it was gathered and translated into Coptic by 4th century Gnostic Christians and translated into English. These books were gathered in the 4th century, around the same time the Council of Nicea biblical edits were made in the 4th century AD by the Romans under Constantine. Perhaps when the Romans edited the Bible, they took out all these books that Jesus taught and believed in. They chose the books that they wanted included, and not the oneness that the Gospel of Thomas mentioned, or the equality of women in the Gospel of Mary, as they wanted a patriarchal system. It clearly wasn't inspired by God. Either way, channeling higher density beings and more advanced beings such as angels has shown us that the Bible is half negatively influenced anyway. Therefore, the only truth will be found through channeling sessions such as in this book. Who were the Essenes? The Essenes lived in a secret community in Qumran, where they lived together in a community, sharing everything and needing no money. The writers mentioned that they lived among palm trees and ate palm berries or dates. Archaeologists confirmed this and dug up remains of date palms and date seeds. So Sudi was right about trees growing in Qumran. Sudi lived there in that community. If people wished to eat in their own quarters, they would go to the keepers of the stores and take what they needed, but there was no gluttony allowed. They weren't allowed to partake of swine or anything that the hoof had been uncloven. The swine, it eats anything. It would eat dung if this is what it is fed. It would not matter. Therefore, it is considered unclean. They could eat only those with the cloven hoof that chewed the cud. The camel chews the cud, but the Essenes do not eat the camel. They would eat lamb, goat, occasionally an ox or a young bullock, and different types of birds for meat. They would cook a grain in boiling water with a little salt added. Sometimes herbs would be added as well to what sounded to be described as bread, since it could be rolled up. Sudi personally did not like to eat meat, though. He said, "It is not good to kill something for your own enjoyment. This is God's creature you are destroying. To eat meat is to tie one here, to tie one's soul to the earth." Sudi couldn't understand why people would want to put a pillow under their heads while sleeping. He then said, "The head is not elevated. The ideal way of sleeping is to have the feet higher than the head to aid in circulation. To elevate the head, then you would have problems with your feet swelling. To elevate the head would be to bring about headaches and many other problems. To elevate the feet would aid in the circulation of the body and stop it settling down. The Essenes would put a cushion beneath the feet or tilt the bed. The only other furnishings in the house were shelves to put things on, such as clothes and things of that nature. The temple is only for the worship of Elohim, but the synagogue is also a place of teaching. The synagogue has a place for Gentiles and a women's court. In the temple, all are allowed who worship God. A channeling session revealed that God doesn't need to be worshipped and doesn't ask anyone to. Sudi said those who would teach in the temple are the teachers of law. There are priests. Each has their own specialty. One would have law, and another would have the mysteries, and others would be speaking of the different knowledge that has been passed on down. A rabbi would be different. He teaches Jewish law and Jewish religion, as it were. Description of Qumran, Sudi said, there is the area where the people would gather. They would kneel or sit on the floor. And there is the altar. Behind the altar is the curtain, the inner sanctum which has the veil across. And inside there, the Torah and the scrolls are kept, Kabal. During the studies or celebrations of holy days, whatever is occurring, they would bring this forth and read of them and share. There would be the sharing of souls, then discussion of dealings of God and life and many things. In the synagogue, women are not allowed except in the women's court. Here, all are allowed. Even though the synagogue wouldn't allow women inside, the Essene community allowed the women to be equal in their community. The religious objects in the temple are the cup and usually an incense burner. The cup is passed between all and shared in this manner. It bonds them together and makes them one. In Christianity, the people partake of their own individual cup to drink to remember the blood Jesus shed. So Christianity took that ritual from the Essenes. There was usually wine when the Essenes drank from the cup. Holy Communion or Lord's Supper. This was supposed to be connected with Christ, but he was not yet born. The bread was not passed. Sudi said, it is the cup of the lifeblood. It is the sharing of life between all. The wine represents the blood of all and the sharing together. The significance is that everyone is of one blood. One must have accepted the precepts to be able to share oneness, partly due to the fact that they would perhaps not understand what the point is that is trying to be brought up with this. It is not that we do not believe that they are one with us because we do, it's just that the sharing is brought about in their own time. If they are ready for it, it is not stressed, so they don't try to force people to drink the cup, so this honors free will. Thus, a stranger passing through would not be allowed to participate in this. This ritual was performed at ceremonies where everyone would be together and able to attend. It was done on the Sabbath, but was not restricted to that day. Sudi said that, to his knowledge, this ceremony was not performed by the Jewish community at large. The Last Supper. When Jesus performed the Last Supper with his disciples in the upper room, this was not a new ritual. The symbolism of the bread is a Jewish custom, and the symbolism of the blood was from the Essenes he learned from during the lost years, those ages 12 to 30, when we don't hear about him in the Bible. To the Essenes, this ceremony symbolized that they were all of one blood and the sharing of life between all. Chakras. Sandalwood was burned in the incense burner because it could help open some of the chakra centers within yourself. Whereas drinking wine from one cup was a rite of the Essenes, other religions used the incense, even the Romans, ceremony of cleansing. The Christians refer to this as baptism, but Sudi called it a ceremonial cleansing with water. Sudi said, there is a ceremony of cleansing. After a person has had his bar mitzvah, they are taken out and they have to be considered to reach the age of consent. And they choose to follow the path of Yahweh or perhaps to fall off. If they choose to follow this, they are cleansed in the waters. It is said that they are washing away their past, and from this point they shall start anew. There are different ways of doing it. Some pour the water over, and some make them lie down upon the water. No one would go into the sea of death to do this. It is usually done in one of the fountains there. They would either wear a robe made out of flax or none at all, which is part of the purification, the stripping bare of the soul. A priest or an elder would perform the ceremony, usually only done once in a person's life. John the Baptist got the ritual idea from the Essenes when he was baptizing people in the Jordan River. How the Essenes dressed. They dressed quite simply. Both men and women wore a plain white robe made of spun and woven sheep's hair or a flaxen that had been processed. The robes gathered at the waist and touched the floor, considered to be cool. Underneath the robes, men wore breechcloths. Both sexes wore sandals. It rarely was cold enough to wear anything else, but if it did, they had various colors of cloaks. The adult males wore a beard, a sign of belonging to the community. Jesus wore a beard, but outside of Qumran there were people who chose to be clean-shaven. There are communities that never cut their hair. The Romans wore their hair short. It was permissible at any length for the Essenes, as long as it was well-groomed and clean. Most preferred it about shoulder length. This convinces me more that Jesus was a part of the Essenes. Jesus had a beard and hair to his shoulder length, just like the Essenes. If anyone left the Essene community, they were required to dress like others so they wouldn't appear different. Others outside the community did not wear white robes. They wore colored clothes with various headdresses. Ancient writing confirmed these facts about how they dressed. The Essenes were in danger outside of their walls. Therefore, they would tend to dress like everyone else in order not to be recognized. Young students wore a grey cloth across their foreheads. The seekers wore a green one. They finished what everyone must learn, but they're seeking more. The masters wore blue and the elders wore white. Outside visitors or students wore red as they came to learn, seek, and study. The blue shows much inner peace. The white is the ultimate attainment. They are at total rest and have achieved all that must be achieved. These coloured headbands were also worn by women, since they were considered equal to men and also taught as students as well. The master teacher Sadi said, if a girl was not taught, how could she stay one with her husband? Or, I do not understand. This explains some of Jesus' attitudes towards women. Women were not treated differently in Qumran during Jesus' time there, which was against the popular Jewish customs at the time. This also explains why the Bible appeared to favor men, because that was the popular Jewish custom. But Jesus saw women as equal to men, as shown in the Gospel of Mary, which was taken out of the Bible and the teachings of the Essenes. Sudi didn't know the word pets and thought that it was selfish to keep a pet, since the animal may want to live a different life. The law of one states that animals that experience love for their owner, such as pets, can be harvestable for third density, which shows evolution when interacting with the higher density human. The Essenes would only kill an animal, such as a snake, if they were dangerous. Otherwise, they wouldn't kill God's creatures. They used pumice instead of soap for bathing. Pumice stone is a popular skincare tool often used for exfoliation. Archaeologists believe the Qumran community was governed by rules and regulations set up by priests. Based on Dead Sea Scrolls translations, they think the Essenes had some very strict and cruel regulations. Some believe that didn't sound like them, for they knew they were gentle and just. Sudi said there was a council of elders that set the Qumran community rules, with about 9 or 10 elders on their council. The elders were chosen by those in their area or field of study. Only the masters and students in their particular field of study could vote in the community. Archaeologists believed the Essenes were a religious order and the priests were the leaders. Sudi said the council was higher than the priests, and the priests would only have authority over their students. Masters could turn students away if there's any malice in their intent. In the Old Testament, the Jews believed in animal sacrifices, but Sudi was against it. Sudi said, "Why would it be pleasing to Yahweh to kill something that he created? This does not sound very logical." The Jewish teachings, the Torah and the laws, are part of the Essenes' belief, but not the whole. The Jews practicing sacrifices were borrowed from other religions. They weren't original teachings. The Essenes don't sacrifice. They would place and burn incense on the altars in the form of sacrifice. Sudi didn't understand the word holiday, as it wasn't used in those days. Sudi called it holy days. He said there is Passover, Days of Atonement, and Rosh Shofar. It is the festival of the new year, the new season. Sudi wasn't greatly familiar with the outside and the laws of the Jewish community. Days of Atonement is the time each year the Essenes lay aside the things they have done and ask forgiveness for them and give reparation to those they have harmed in any way. They have the joy of life. If a person comes over for a meal, the host will wash his feet. This is a symbol of humility. It is also done on the Day of Atonement to show Yahweh that one is humbling oneself in his eyes. Jesus washing people's feet is another thing he learned from the Essenes. Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year study called Rosh Shofar. Rosh means beginning. The observance of Rosh Hashanah is the blowing of shofar, or ram's horn, in the synagogue as a summons to judgment or repentance. Day of Atonement is now known as Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year for the Jewish religion. Fasting helps keep the body balanced. Not eating for 16 hours a day, drinking about a gallon of water a day for men and about 100 ounces for women, as well as cutting out sugar, will make it drastically easier to fast that long. The husband and wife are chosen for each other by the elders. A chart is cast in Qumran when a person is born, and they are matched on this. They can refuse to marry, but then never have a mate. They are also allowed to stay single. Women had much more freedom in Qumran than in other places in Israel. They could remain single if they wished and become teachers in the community. Sudi said if women could only marry and have children, then many times a great mind may be lost. So the Essenes saw many women to also contribute mentally to society, that they aren't inferior to anybody and aren't only good to bear children, take care of their family and the house. Women are much more than that. Sudi said, "This is very sad, for is not a child's first years formed with its mother? And therefore, if it is not a woman of intelligence, how can it be a child of intelligence? God created two forms, both male and female, to complement each other, not to be above or below another. The Essenes do not have slaves. They have even freed some people and bought them to make them free." Sudi's father once freed a man, and that man decided to stay with them. They were a communist society. They can own some things that are theirs, but everything is everyone's. It is shared. They could own certain things by working at different things. Everyone is judged according to merit. If he is doing the best that he can do in whatever he is doing, then he is judged on the same basis as somebody who is just good at tending gardens. But he's doing this to the best of his ability. He is considered equal to a man who is a brilliant scholar but is also doing the best in his field. They are the same. They are equal because they are both doing their best at what they do. In this, you are judged on merit. If you are not working as well, perhaps you do not have as much. The community doesn't use any money. No one goes without. If there is a need, it is given. The things that are worth it are the things that are earned. A gardener may be given a new area to have space, and a scholar may be given papyri. They're all seen as equal. They just have to do the job to the best of their ability. Sudi mentioned sins to be pride, speaking down upon someone, to judging, but the law of one does mention that sins don't exist and that everyone learns at their own pace. If they stole, they would have to return it. If they wronged someone else, they would have to ask for their forgiveness, then forgive themselves. The law of one states that there's no right or wrong, for we are all learning at different paces. Dolores Cannon told Sudi that outside the walls they might steal, and he passionately stated that he wouldn't want to go outside the walls of the Qumran Essene community. Their community was based upon love. Hebrew law forbids divorce. If he remarries, then that's considered adultery. The law of one would be okay with divorce. Marriage is an activity humanity on earth takes part in, and not something the more evolved beings and angels would say is necessary. If there was a good reason for divorce, the Essenes could marry someone else. They weren't always perfect in drawing up the charts for marriage. Sodi said it's because they aren't gods. No one mortal is infallible. Adultery is when it wasn't agreed upon and the other person was hurt. If it's agreed upon, then it isn't adultery. Jesus was taught by the Essenes, and this would explain his defense of the woman about to be stoned. He understood that sex between consenting adults was not considered adultery by the Qumran community. The Romans used the crucifixion to nail felons to the cross so that other people would think twice before performing the same crime. Burial customs. A lot of times it's anointed with oils and incense and then buried in cloths. Some prefer burning the body to ash. Sodi said, "A sepulchre is a tomb. It is a larger area that has perhaps been hollowed out and prepared. It is something that was brought over by the Egyptians. Stone or something is set as a type of door, therefore it is closed." Sudi also mentioned it is very rare for any of us to entomb the bodies of others. The oils are used to help with the smells. Some of the oils and herbs used are myrrh and frankincense. Myrrh and frankincense were used as gifts of the 3 wise men. Frankincense is rubbed into the body to protect the nose of people preparing the body, and the scent is nice. It is also used as an ointment to heal boils and sores, and it's an excellent repellent to drive away insects. Sudi said Rome tends to destroy the ones who speak the truth. Herod Antipas is the king of Sudi's area. Pontius Pilate is a governor, whom Herod obeys. Pilate has the soldiers. He's married to Herodias. Sudi said that is his whore. She's been married 3 times. She killed her first husband to marry Philip, then left Philip to marry Antipas.